Hello, everyone, and welcome to our webinar today. We put on a lot of these webinars throughout the year, so can't thank you enough for joining. What are we talking about today? We're talking about federal contracting compliance with a great speaker in Jeff Shapiro here. So really excited to have him here. Just a couple bit of housekeeping notes, and we're going to dive right in. Jeff shares my disdain for slide-heavy presentations, so we won't go down that path. Couple bit of housekeeping notes. One, you will receive a recording and these 3 slides. Don't worry, we do have a Q&A feature. I do encourage you to use that liberally, early and often. We certainly have our prepared remarks, but I'll take some periodic pauses to see what questions are coming in to keep the conversation flowing. And that's the key word there. It's going to be a conversation. And then just as you're planning out the rest of your weeks, for those interested, tomorrow my colleague Suku Kasim is also hosting a webinar on using the VTDoc software as it pertains to this topic. That'll be more hands-on, more software focused, just FYI. So I wanted to call that out before we kick things off. So let's do it. In terms of brief intros, I'm Kyle Peterson. I lead our customer success team here at VisibleThread, and I'm joined by Jeff Shapiro, kind of the star of today's show. He has over 20 years of experience in financial management and federal government contract audit and compliance. He has experience and knowledge in financial statement audits, federal contract systems, compliance audits, and advisory services. Previously, he's worked with the federal government as a cost team evaluation lead, a contracting officer's representative, and program manager. And currently, Jeff is a partner with Cohn Resnick. So really delighted to have him here and excited to kick things off. That sound fair, Jeff?
Sounds good.
Let's do it. So compliance, Jeff, as you know, that's a broad topic. We picked it purposely. What I think we'll do is we'll kind of start high level and we'll drill further down. So what I thought we'd do is maybe take just a minute or two and walk us through the current landscape when it comes to federal contracting. Are there any trends that you're seeing that maybe our audience is aware of or find interesting to consider as we think about winning new business and defending incumbency, wherever our audience kind of fits on that spectrum, because ultimately we want to drive revenue into the business. I'll pass it over to you.
Yeah. First of all, thank you, Kyle, and the VisibleThread team for inviting me today. I'm excited to be here. And please, everyone, throw in questions in the chat. Kyle and I really want to concentrate on that. You're spending some time out here in your busy mornings to spend time with us. And as much as I can sit here and talk about the things that I'm interested in, I've seen, working as a partner here in Cohn Resnick, I act both as a government contractor some days, and other days I'm advising government contractors. And so I provide a lot of perspective, and I want to be able to give that today. Anyways, to get to your question, Kyle, I'm not trying to ignore it, I promise. Obviously, we're seeing a lot of these large-scale GWACs, government-wide acquisition contracts, and best-in-class. We were just talking right before we started here, Oasis Plus, now Alliant 3 and it was COSP4, which I know I guess is a 4-letter word these days. So the government is trying to make it as easy as possible for the end user to get the goods and services they need as quick as possible. And so, many agencies are seeing these larger acquisition efforts as an easier way to acquire these goods and services quicker. So what have you all seen? All these point scoring opportunities, and from a compliance standpoint, I won't talk about the past performance stuff, but other speakers address that. But from compliance, it's things like having approved business systems. What's a business system? Accounting, purchasing, estimating. Those are the 3 main ones. There's 3 others that are bigger in bigger procurements, but just talk about those. Are you able to perform on cost reimbursable contracts? So the government wants to know if you have an approved accounting system. And then as it gets larger, are you going to be submitting a number of change orders? Are you going to be working on a bunch of other modified task orders under your contract? So you want to start talking about estimating systems. And then are you buying a lot of stuff, using a lot of subcontractors? And so they're going to be very interested on the status of your purchasing system. So those come to mind immediately. Then I add on, I can't say it enough, and this goes for any GWEC, and it goes for single award solicitations that are out there. Cybersecurity requirements. I may not be the cybersecurity partner at my firm, but man, that is going to get harder and harder. The big buzzword you hear, especially in the DoD contracting community, is CMMC, but individual agencies are trying to roll out their own version of CMMC. The first one comes to mind is Homeland Security, but every agency out there is looking to really get higher requirements for securing data and controlled unclassified information. If you don't have a good handle, good formalized policy procedures over how you handle a variety of cyber requirements, you're going to be way behind. So, I mean, I just read an article this morning. DoD and intelligence contractors who, work with those agencies, they're getting hit hard with AI-based attacks. And so, how are you going to be able to not only defend it, but evidence to the government evaluators how you do that? And then finally, Kyle, you mentioned about incumbents out there. I just want to throw it out there. Being, like you mentioned, I was on a cost evaluation team. I've seen too many times that incumbents, when bidding on any solicitation, whether it's large scale or small scale, a lot of incumbents just say, hey, listen, we've been really good at this for the past year, and we're going to continue being really good at this, without providing any details about how they're going to do it. That's a huge mistake. So when you're an incumbent, I just want to throw it out there, and I've seen it. I've seen incumbents kicked out of competitive ranges and not even given a chance for a best and final offer because they didn't act like they were just any one of the multiple offers they're submitting for an award and treating it as a brand new award. So if anything, I want to make sure I say at some point during this hour session that when you're the incumbent, treat it like a new award. So that way you're going to be fully follow all the rules of the RFP. All right. I probably took that way too far than you were expecting, Kyle.
No, that's great, Jeff. Certainly a lot to chew on there. Maybe a couple of things that I heard that I'll kind of poke at a bit further before we keep moving. So when you mention these business systems, purchasing, accounting, estimating, those cybersecurity restrictions or guardrails, so is it safe to say that it's not enough that you just need to have those systems? I think you spoke around it. We also need to have proof, evidence, and documentation that we can share with those evaluators. So it sounds like if people on the call don't have that documentation in order, or at least a plan in place to be able to share it, they should probably get cracking on that.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, that's the biggest case. And geez, that's the bottom line for anything you do for government contract compliance. It's document, right? So a lot of companies who are listening to this call, you probably have an estimating system. When I talk about a system, it's not just about the software, it's about the technology, the people, and the process. And so in order to complete that triangle, it's all about what can you do in order to evidence and show to an outside evaluator that you're more than just, this is just what we do on a day-to-day basis. Great. So you may have a great estimating system, but to show that you can meet the various criteria, whether they use a DFARS criteria or they somehow make their own, which I've never seen, there's got to be proof of it. Have you been doing it? Are you consistent with doing it? My goodness, that's a huge challenge. And then, those formalized policies and procedures. You say you do this and you have emails back and forth, but are you actually doing are you setting yourself a level playing field? So when you're working on bids, does it go through the same gate processes? Does it go through the same amount of rigorous review to make sure there are no errors in it? All that kind of stuff. You got to show it and prove it. You may say you do it, and you may say it depends. You can build a formal policy and procedure that talks about it depends, like, threshold-based things. Not everything needs to go to the CEO for release to the government. So anyways, we can talk for hours on business systems, but I know you have other questions, Kyle.
No, for sure. And we don't want people's eyes to glaze over. It's important. And I think maybe the last thing I'd say there that I was thinking of when you were speaking there, Jeff, is, I think sometimes when we think systems, when we think documentation, we think, oh gosh, more red tape, more bureaucracy, but ultimately consistency and documentation is a competitive advantage. If you don't do it and somebody else does, you're putting yourself at risk to win that business or defend that incumbent stance. So it is important. Excellent. So I think we've certainly kind of framed a few things. A good intro, Jeff. Let's move into challenges. Let's scare people a little bit here, in terms of when we think about compliance, when we think about winning competition, all that good stuff. It's certainly not easy. So we did some kind of initial polling of the audience before the discussion today, and a few things came to mind in terms of challenges that they're seeing or things that keep them up at night. And overwhelmingly, the group was mentioning kind of scope creep as a challenge, as something that, shocker, that keeps them up at night. What do you think contributes to that? You can hit any part of the life cycle, whether it's still in the bid stage or in kind of contract performance. Just run with that football, Jeff. It's a great topic.
You got it. Yeah, no, tremendous topic. I hear about it all the time. I'm running out of funds. Why are you running out? Why are you running out of funds? Because the customer keeps asking me to do more stuff that I didn't expect at the beginning. And my first question is, did you tell them that? So let's start from pre-award, and then we'll talk about post-award.
Sure.
So pre-award, how do you prevent scope creep? Understanding requirements, okay? And it shouldn't start at when you receive that draft RFP. It actually should start before you see that RFP. You need to do your homework. Get to know these customers. Whether it's yourself, your people within your company to get into that agency, or you're working with a teaming partner that's a subject matter expert that's often at the agency. Well, you may want to work with that teaming partner, be like, hey, listen, you're on the inside, you hear what's going on in the halls. What are they really looking for in here? What do they really mean by, response time or whatever the solicitation may be about? Like, you need to be talking with the customers, and yeah, I get it. The customers need to be willing to talk to you. And when you start getting to a source selection environment, that's when they usually put up their hands and don't want to talk to you. But that's why it's important to do the homework a year, 2 years in advance. I mean, it sounds crazy, but a lot of these contracts usually have a very defined life cycle. It's a 5-year life cycle. Get in there during year 3, early year 4, and start saying, hey, listen, I know this is going to eventually come up for competition. I want to talk to you about, what's going well. How do you see it evolving? So you start getting in their heads and understanding where they want to go with the requirement. So step 1, once the RFP is out, give it a good deep read and have your technical experts look through it and poke holes at it and say, is there any chance they can take this in a different way? Ask those critical questions. That's what the Q&A is supposed to be about. And I get it. You're always worried. You're balancing. If I ask this question, am I cluing in my competitors into what I can uniquely provide to this customer? So you got to balance that. I get it. But I'd rather you not be surprised because you didn't ask the question. Okay. So I think I caught that as quickly, as succinctly as possible. But post-award always happens, Kyle. And I can talk about it, for the audits I do on behalf of government agencies. I typically have a certain way I do my audits, do it according to government auditing standards. But sometimes the customer's like, well, did you also consider, whether or not there was also wasteful spending in here? And I'll say, I may have considered it, but that wasn't part of my scope. Oh, can you do that as well? And I'll say, sure, but here's how much it'll cost in addition. So, never anything is that typically clear, but you need to be upfront and say, hey, understand your SOW such that when the customer is asking something that may not quite be in there, you have to have that candid conversation. And that's why it's the most important is to have a great relationship with your contracting officer. You don't come back, combatively. Just say, listen, I want to make you happy and I want to do what's right. But if I start, doing everything you ask, no matter what, I'm going to run out of money, especially, or even if it's fixed price. You just say, look, I bid this knowing these were the requirements. You start doing these other things, this is going to end up looking like a worse business decision. But no matter what, requirements to what you actually ask, and all you have to do is have that interactive, great dialogue saying, hey, contract counsel, you asked me to do this thing. I don't know how this is. Can you show me in the SOW how this is covered, and then have the conversation. Worst case they say is, no, sorry, I interpret this to mean that this is within scope. And then you have to make a business decision from there, whether or not to pursue it or, start talking to lawyers about, if this is something you want to fight back on. But yes, you have to be very proactive is the bottom line from well before the solicitation to the day it closes out.
Really, really good thoughts, Jeff. I think I might work backwards based
Please.
on what I just heard. But I think even at something as simple as a webinar, I don't know if this is a helpful analogy or not, but I gauge the effectiveness in a webinar on how many questions I'm getting. If I was a contracting officer, gosh, I'd be concerned if I wasn't getting questions from bidders, whether they're an incumbent, whether they're a challenger. So I think you nailed it there. And I think before this discussion too, Jeff, we were mentioning kind of the Q&A phase. If you're pursuing an opportunity where there is kind of a formal Q&A period where they're published and received and all that good stuff, it does seem like, in my experience, anecdotally, to be a bit of a missed opportunity. I see a lot of questions around section L fonts, page limit, a lot around section M, rightfully so, size standards. I'm not discounting those questions, but I feel like I see a lot more of those than really hard questions about what am I being asked to do here to make sure that I fully understand it, my subcontractors fully understand it, so on and so forth. Would you agree with that observation?
Yeah, the better everyone understands the requirements from the top to the bottom of your value chain, the better your bid is going to be. And you know what? If you lose putting your best foot forward, that's all you can ask, right? You can't, I would rather get it right instead of getting thrown out because you misunderstood a key requirement. And then, most section M's will always say, if you don't demonstrate complete understanding of our RFP requirements, we have the right to throw you out. So there you go.
Yeah, no, nailed it. And then I think too, when we think about, you mentioned rightfully so, having that strong relationship with the CO, with the customer themselves. I think I've also seen it where within kind of the bidder environment, we've got multiple RFPs we're pursuing at once. We have kind of bid and proposal teams working with SMEs who have their day jobs outside of proposal support. There are time constraints, and I'm sure that when we're going through those SALs, maybe we're not going through it as deeply as we would like. And I think that contributes to just, you might feel like you understand every requirement, but you've missed a few in the weeds just due to time constraints, maybe due to manual effort to kind of review and parse through it. Anything to add, agree or disagree there?
Yeah. Checking assumptions on both sides, right? So if you're the bidder and look at, are they providing those certain pieces of equipment that you're assuming within your bid that you're not going to price because you're assuming the government's it's in it? Well, double check it, because you're going to be in for a big surprise when the government adds $500,000, $1 million to your cost in its evaluation because you didn't include that piece of equipment because you assumed the government was going to provide it for you.
For sure. I think this is probably a perfect opportunity, Jeff, we talked about this at length too when we were prepping. We've spoken about a bid that we're pursuing actively now. I think there's a lot of challenge and heartache, maybe in terms of, should we be pursuing this at all? Any thoughts there in terms of what can the audience do or think about when they're thinking about what to pursue, whether it's, best fit, things they need to consider when they're making those bid decisions? Because, scope creep can occur for work that you do all the time. I would imagine it's more of a risk if you're trying to enter new areas, new markets, new agencies. Run with that football.
Sure. I mean, a lot of that answer is a technical response. I don't know if I want to go too deep into that. I mean, if it's a new area of service that you're looking to expand into, how big is the contract and how bad can things go wrong that you're going to risk yourself a CPARS that looks, anything but, anything below satisfactory, right? So, I know everyone's very anxious to build horizons, get into new agencies, provide new services, but you got to be really sure that sometimes that, maybe if I'm going to try a different kind of line of business, different kinds of service. Maybe you try something at a much lower level, something maybe below the simplified acquisition threshold. So you can just, you dip your toe in and be like, okay, yeah, we can do this. And then you go in for the bigger requirements. So that's, the technical perspective. From a cost perspective, I mean, I can't help it, Kyle. I'm a numbers guy. And so you need to build in, a couple permutations when running the numbers. It's like, sure, here's your one bid number, but you also have to start going through the decision-making process of what could go wrong here. This is a cost plus fixed fee contract. Technically, that lowers the risk to you as a contractor to make your fee number, right? That being said, cost overruns. How good is that government agency going to be about, truing you up if your indirect rates goes truly out of whack? There's no requirement for the government to reimburse you no matter what if you go over just purely because of your indirect rates, even though it's a cost reimbursable contract. Once you hit your funding cap, that's it. So, how good is your cost control? Do you have the right program manager assigned to this so they can, do what they can to avoid that funding problem? But then that's also on your back office, the people that are managing your indirect rates. That's a team effort. And that's, again, another hour-long webinar. But your indirect rates are largely driven by how well your business is doing as a whole. Because you lose a huge contract, all of a sudden your G&A rate goes up by a bunch of percentage points, and all of a sudden the absorption has to be taken by all those other projects. Now what? So it really is a wholesome conversation and consideration that the team needs to take into consideration, has to think about before bidding. So many different things could go wrong from a profit standpoint, from a reputational standpoint. All that's got to be taken into consideration.
For sure. I think what I want to move to now, Jeff, is I love a good story of a protest. I think it's great. It's excellent reading. I am curious, you had a great article in NCMA magazine recently.
Thank you.
Where you cited a couple. You don't need to cite those two, pick your favorite, but was there a recent protest or maybe a major award recently that you're aware of that maybe spoke to compliance challenges, misses, or the bidder nailed it? I think that might help kind of put some real life context around these ideas.
Sure. So let me pick one. I have to do this one just because yet another decision came out about this procurement. The bids, let's put it this way, this thing just celebrated a third birthday in terms of when the original the proposals were due. And they just went in for another protest, and the GAO just sustained yet another protest. So this is a protest, I might have to name names, but it's an Air Force contract for services at their ICBM division out there. I'm pretty sure it's in Colorado. And so professional services, they're not building the missiles. It's a support contract. And, what's very important about service contracts is that most contracting officers are going to include a FAR clause, namely 52.222.46, the evaluation of compensation for professional employees. Well, what this FAR clause is intentioned is government realizes that most companies, on these large support contracts, that companies are going to be vying for talent. But generally, you can't just take a whole 50, 75, 100 people workforce that works on a certain contract and just fully switch them out. No, for the most part, 80, 90% of those employees, when a contract comes up for rebid, most of them stay. They just change their corporate badges, and they come back. Contract ends on Friday. They come back on Monday. A new employee doing the same job, with a new company doing the same job. And so, what contracting, with all government as a whole, realizes with this FAR clause is saying, listen, if there's going to be a rebid on a contract like this, you better look very carefully at all these professional employees working on this contract, and don't let someone come in and give you a false narrative that, oh, we'll just do the same work for 20% less. Well, how the hell are you going to do that? Are you still going to pay these people the same salary? So as long as the people aren't hurt by it, that's realistic. I mean, who's going to take the new job at a 20% pay cut? No one is. So if anyone's going to have if there's going to be a cut in costs for a project like that, it's going to come out of efficiencies in the back office. It's going to come from, maybe some technological solutions where you can maybe shed a couple FTEs. Those make sense. But when it comes to the actual individual people, you're probably going to have to pay them approximately the same, if not more. And so a couple issues came up with this. The first protest, they included this, and they would say, hey, listen, all offers, we're going to compare your prices and costs of the individuals working on this contract against, what it was in the RFP. That was the intention against what's been happening. Well, the first time around, the government forgot that the current incumbents were working under fixed price contracts. So they didn't actually have the information about what all the people on the contract were actually making at the job level. And so when they did the evaluation, they sort of just compared compensation to general market rates instead of looking at what was on contract. So losing contractor the first time around, raised their hand and said, what the hell, you didn't do this? Air Force said, but we couldn't. Government said, tough. You made the rules. It was in the solicitation. You need to do it. So, hey, to redo it. And so what's happened, now I can continue the story, which is rarely gets the opportunity, is so they reissued. So the Air Force makes corrections to the solicitation saying, yep, we're going to do it right this time. We promise. And they told our offers, listen, all you need to do is just revise your cost proposals, and that's it. So those cost proposals came in, and apparently, so what happened is the winning company was someone who bid a premium over the incumbent. I think it was the incumbent. Well, let's just put it this way. I wasn't sure who's the incumbent, but the winning bidder beat the protester by like 10% costs. And in best value procurements, contracting officers are allowed to pick a premium if they feel that premium is worth the higher technical rating in the evaluation. And so they made the determination, hey, one competitor was about 10% more, but I don't mind paying that 10% more. Problem came in that cost proposal, that winning company actually brought down their labor costs and said in their cost value, yeah, we're going to pay these people about average, blah, 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 blah. However, in their technical proposal, they had stated, hey, listen, in their management value, this is how we're going to make sure you have the same great people working on this company. We're going to pay them well above average, on top of the percentile. And I guess the protesting company must have caught wind of this, or they saw it during the discovery in the first protest. They're like, how the hell did they come down so much when I know they were paying these people premiums? These are large contractors that are involved, so their indirect rates are not going to move that much. And so as you may imagine, that protest, like I said, that protest was upheld once again because the government made the mistake of not performing a proper cost realism analysis. And also they made the rules that say that you're supposed to evaluate compensation. So it's not just about the incumbents, but if your plan, your professional employee compensation plan says, well, this is how I'm going to pay these employees in order to retain them over the course of the contract. If your costing doesn't match your plan, that's a huge problem. So listen, everyone listening today, business developers and proposal writers, make sure everything within your proposal is consistent with the messaging. Your technical approach matches how it's costed, but that includes these compensation plans. You're going to be providing these great fringe benefits. Well, make sure that's within that fringe benefit rate, or else you're going to get in trouble and open yourself up for protest. So there's your story. This poor Air Force is now probably going to go into their fourth year of not being able to award this contract, which I'm sure the incumbent is loving. They're on the third year of a bridge to this new contract.
It's a great example there, Jeff, of the nexus between, requirements, regulatory requirements in terms of a FAR clause, alignment in bidders' proposals, and also, to your point, the Air Force in this case, the customer, I'll just say,
Yeah.
um, you know, choosing the right contract type and maybe being clear or not in terms of their instructions to offers, which I think is just a perfect segue into kind of our next topic here. When we think about the structure and the writing of RFPs, um, I think you mentioned maybe more of a focus on the government side in terms of plain language, in terms of the instructions. We want offers to understand what we need. Maybe talk a little bit about maybe the challenge there historically and what you
Sure.
see in the government side in terms of what they're doing to rectify that.
Yeah. So understand what you're buying is what my advice is to the government, and where can offers cut corners in terms of their bid. And so when you're performing that cost realism analysis, like, do you have all the information you need? And one of the suggestions in the article that Kyle, you mentioned, I appreciate you mentioned that, was maybe you need a government auditor as part of your cost evaluation team, so you can go in and actually proactively ask questions to the offer. That being said, understanding and demonstrating the requirements within Section L. So if you're I'm back in the offer side, if that Section L doesn't have a compliance crosswalk, include one in your RFP, please, for the sake of the government evaluators. And that honestly, and this goes for your technical volume, it goes for your past performance volume, it goes for your cost volume. Submit it with your bid. I mean, I get it. There's page limits. If you can't fit it, I get it on the technical and past performance, but the one volume where you never have a page limit is the cost compliance, the cost volume. Submit your compliance matrix that shows your demonstration and understanding of the Section L requirements, even if you need to add it even within that matrix itself that says, I know you asked for a statement of indirect expenses. Well, in lieu of providing that, I'm going to provide you with something else that meets that requirement and why we still think that meets the requirement. If you have to do it that plainly, do it that plainly. Don't leave any doubt to those evaluators when they're assessing the completeness of your response and whether or not and how it applies adjustments. Here's another good example on that one, Kyle, is if you're intending to cap your indirect rates under a cost plus contract, please say so multiple times expressly. A lot of companies will talk about, we're going to control our indirect rates. We're going to control this. We're going to issue management challenges and keep our rates low, and that's why we did it. That's great. But if your intention is to say, I will sign up to the dotted line when this award comes out that I will not charge you a G&A rate higher than 10%, please say that. Because if you don't explicitly say that and that was your intention, your cost evaluation, if I keep looking at the numbers and all it shows to everything that you provided, your budget, whatever else I'm evaluating points to a G&A rate of 12%, you bet your rear end that I'm going to be adjusting your price 2% higher in your G&A, even though that's not what you're going to charge us because you're going to cap it. So I wanted to throw out a couple of things there for you.
And they're great examples, Jeff, in terms of, meaning what you say and doing what you say in terms of, just the difference between control versus cap.
Yeah.
What a difference a word makes. And I do think, and I'm a proud liberal arts major. I think there's real benefit to, and I'm speaking more to kind of the offers, the bidders for this point here, to really taking a look at the complexity of language or ambiguity that's occurring in any of your proposal volumes, but particularly in cost. I don't hear a lot about that. I have a story. I was involved. I was a former contracts manager actually in the aerospace industry. We had a fairly hefty cost volume, as you can imagine, for a big bad kind of aircraft repair modification type contract. And we were under DCA audit. In terms of the proposal phase, it was that big of a value. And DCA will always have questions, to be perfectly clear. You're never going to write away all questions from auditors. I'm not saying that. But I do think if we had written that cost volume more in the language of the evaluator, who isn't necessarily, or the auditor, who isn't necessarily an aircraft mechanic, could we have gone from 55 questions maybe to more like 25, where that transparency not only builds trust, but man, can it get us to award faster? I would like to think so. And so whether it's the
Agreed.
government more clearly, delineating requirements in Section L and its contractors, whether it's being very conscious in word choice and cap versus control, or to your point, Jeff, being more, I'll say, in your face about here's the compliance crosswalk. This is exactly how we meet each requirement. Just less assumptions, more clarity, less complexity. Now I'm all worked up, but that'd be my quick kind of battle cry
No,
there.
you're absolutely right. Remember, there are humans behind your evaluation. And yes, I'm sure I don't want to bust your where you're going with this conversation, but could there be AI behind the scenes coming up to help evaluate proposals? It's probably coming. But at the end of the day, no one is going to trust AI to make the decisions here or make any judgments on assessing risk. But there are humans behind this process. And so whatever you can do to help these people who have stepped away from their day-to-day job at the government, who are now sequestered at some dusty basement of a building that hasn't been used in a couple of years, but GSA still has the name of the building and that agency, so you better use it for something. Great, we'll use it for source selection. They don't want to be there longer than they need to. I've been in there too many times. We had too many shared lunches where we just complained about, I can't believe we're sitting here for the next 3 weeks. And so make their jobs as easy as possible. Don't leave any doubts, don't leave any questions, and don't risk you're losing, getting kicked out of the competitive range because you failed to make it obvious to them that you met every Section L requirement.
Nailed it. Couldn't agree more, Jeff. And I'll leave everyone with one other quick anecdote before you mentioned AI. Let's talk AI. It's on everyone's mind.
Yeah, let's please do that. I figure you may want to talk about it, given what you all do for a living.
That's it. But I remember my most famous example. There was a tech volume that had a 98-word sentence. And it's just, man, you're brutalizing not only your own internal reviewers, but your evaluators on the other side. So even though it's technical language, I think that even Einstein would have a hard time getting through a 98-word sentence. But I love a good horror story like that. So
Please.
I think we're in perfect agreement there, Jeff.
Yes.
So AI, yes, clearly there's a lot of challenges. There's a lot we can do better. We, being everyone involved in the process, there's a lot of buzz around artificial intelligence lately. Maybe let's start on the evaluation on the buy side, then we'll maybe talk more about the proposal, the bidder, the seller side. What are you seeing, Jeff? And you alluded to it earlier in terms of, do we currently see or do we foresee evaluators, auditors using AI to help make their lives easier? If so, how? Any risks that are inherent to that? Kind of run with that wherever you see fit.
Yeah, so it's a cautionary tale from the government side, especially when it comes to using AI for what they would deem as a back office function. I think for the mission focused functions, that's going a lot quicker in adoption. But in terms of back office, helping, do accounts payable, evaluating bids, yeah, that I'd say is still very much in progress as they figure out what tools are to best fit that job. So that I would say that's coming. But so it behooves industry to get an understanding of how AI is being used and what where that AI the model is, where it's being hosted, all that kind of stuff. In terms of worrying about where your information is being stored and making sure it doesn't get intermixed with public data. So I think that's a very fair question to ask when that kind of stuff ends up happening. But it is going to happen. I'll say in my own audit practice of government contractors, yeah, I'm planning to start using large language model generative AI tools in order to help me assist do my audits. I will never, ever, ever have AI perform audit top to bottom. I mean, there may be a day where it theoretically could, but at the end of the day, you know, especially audits, I mean, even cost analysis, making business cases if you're a contracting officer, it comes down to human judgment. And so AI, whether it can just do the quick math check of a proposal, or you know, you're doing an initial scan that, hey, does this proposal contain all the elements of what we asked for in an RFP section L? I think it could do that initial scan and then tell the evaluator, hey, here's 10 areas you want to double check to make sure that this was truly addressed and not just, you know, written down within the proposal. We have addressed section L 3.2.2. So yeah, so be ready for it. Know it's coming. But I think you all are obviously using it in some process, and absolutely, it can be a very valuable tool, and I encourage it.
Absolutely. And I think let's maybe think a little bit or drill down further, Jeff, in terms of you nailed it in terms of there's real considerations here in terms of what would be an appropriate use case versus an inappropriate use case for AI. The other thing I'll just quickly throw out to the group is
Please.
I'm sure there's various levels of knowledge and kind of comfort and fluency with AI. There are different types of artificial intelligence. Right now, a lot of the buzz is around generative, Gen AI. You know, write me a past performance volume. It looks like it can do it. It can certainly get you started, but have real candid conversations internally about what do we want to use AI and what type of AI to do and why. What are the inherent risks and limitations, and what guardrails or governance are we going to put in place to govern it? It goes back to what we talked about at the beginning. There's documentation challenges now, or not challenges, but requirements. Essentially, if you're using it as part of your process, it's got to be documented. And I've seen there's a lot of hype right now, and I think I see a lot of people seeing silver bullets dancing in their heads, and I just would want to disabuse people of that notion, whether you're evaluating a proposal or putting something together, particularly something as strategic and competitive as cost, which is inherently contextual. So
Great.
anything else you've seen, Jeff, in terms of governance, guardrails, considerations, just to make sure that it's not the Wild West?
Yeah, so, which is funny you say that. I mean, I'm now seeing government RFPs coming out and asking the question, was AI used in the preparation of this proposal? My answer to that is, who cares?
Yeah.
Let industry decide how it uses AI and how it, you know, submits proposals. If you want AI to write your whole proposal and you submit it blindly, that's your choice. I don't think it's a very good one, but that's your choice. But you know, whether or not, you know, someone like documented a technical approach based on an amalgamation of Wikipedia entries, like that should just be able to come out in the end. Like a technical evaluation should be able to pick that up and be like, huh, that's an interesting approach, but it doesn't apply at all to our program. And so it's just going to get thrown out. So to your point, Kyle, like using your AI to help you with starting points, hey, you know, search, you know, have it be, you know, using an AI that is only housed in your own servers, looking at your own past proposals, and say, hey, listen, write me a past performance volume that is based on the last 3 proposals we did. I don't know. There's so many different permutations you can do there. Get you that starting point. So instead of you clicking and opening your you know, you have 50 proposals, you know, the AI will read all those proposals for you and say, well, here are your last 3 CMS past performances, and this is what you previously wrote about it. There you go. You just saved 5 hours of human time by having that generate.
And I think we just lost Jeff for a moment while he was on a roll. So we'll just give him a second to rejoin. But while that's happening, what I'll just add on, Jeff was on a roll there, is think about making it bite-sized. So if you're a part of an organization that is considering using artificial intelligence, Gen AI, make your initial use cases bite-sized and palatable. You don't need to all of a sudden be AI whizzes. To Jeff's point, I think using it to search show me where I've done or written to certain things in the past. Great initial use case. Then when you're thinking about generating content, help me write this. Start small. What if you just have Gen AI help you write your cover letter or your executive summary? Perfect. You don't need to all of a sudden use it to write an entire proposal, which I wouldn't recommend anyways. So think about it that way too. And then ultimately, what challenges are we trying to solve? Which artificial intelligence kind of functionality is required? And then as you're considering any vendor, really challenge them with questions around security. What access to the open big bad world is there within this LLM? What content is it pulling from? Really ask those questions. So just something to think about there. So let's take just a quick breather here and see if we have any kind of questions flying in. All right, so let's see. Yeah, I'd say this is a great one. We talked about it earlier, but let's drill and elaborate down further.
Oh, I'm back.
Jeff,
Sorry about that, guys.
We gotcha.
I don't know what happened.
No, I am a talker.
Someone pulled the hook on me with that thing.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone.
Like the shepherd's crook came over. No worries at all. Glad to have you back, Jeff. That's all part of the fun of kind of the virtual world that we live in. So I was just kind of finishing the thought in terms of, as an organization, think about which use cases you want to employ AI to do. I also mentioned, and I'm probably going to repeat myself, but briefly, Jeff, in case you agree or disagree, I've been encouraging customers and users, start small. Maybe you just have Gen AI help you write a cover letter or an executive summary. You don't need to go full bore into I need to write this entire proposal, which wouldn't be appropriate anyways, in my opinion. You mentioned the search feature. Where have I written to certain things in the past? Great starting point. And I talked about a few more guardrails.
Good.
So, man, time does fly when you're having fun. Maybe just a couple other questions, Jeff, and we'll kind of get into conclusions here. This is a particularly, I'll say, cost focused. So for those on the line who are kind of cost pricing, listen up. Are there particularly, and this depends, of course, on the contract type, Jeff, the work being performed, but in general, are there particular cost elements that can lead to hangups in the evaluation process? And whether it's, whether it's proof, whether it's type of cost, where do people fall down? Where do evaluators think, oh gosh, here we go again?
Listeners are going to hate this answer because they're going to be like, what can I do to control it? But the answer is subcontracts. Oh boy. For the larger cost type contracts, you're going to have some teaming partners / subcontractors who are not going to feel comfortable providing you, the prime, their proprietary information to submit to the government. So the government allows for that sealed package provision within the RFP instructions so that those subs of yours can submit the sealed packages. You're the prime, you're like, oh no, what did they submit in there that could get us in trouble? Because I briefly talked about cost adjustments, and that's part of the cost realism process that we do. I'd say we, as being the government cost evaluator, we take into consideration about whether or not the prime's bid is realistic. So even if the prime's response talks to how they did thorough cost price analysis, well, in their case, probably price analysis, because if they didn't share proprietary information with the prime, they probably only did a price analysis. Their make or buy decisions, all these details about why they thought all their subs were reasonable and realistic. When you start opening up the subcontractor's sealed bid, you see that lots of their detailed information talks about, well, the prime gave me these target prices, and so I follow their loaded rates for what they told me to do. But really, here's all my indirect rates, and everything says that I actually should have a wrap rate of 2.2, but the prime was forcing me into something at 1.5. Guess what do you think the government might do with that information? I mean, sure, it should be controlled by the contract type that you have with that subcontract. I mean, again, you have to be very careful and be like, look, I am going to use a fixed price contract with the subcontract. So no matter what they provide, like, don't make any adjustments. I'm going to make a fixed price and I've already negotiated it. So again, it's in language that you can try to help control that. But ultimately, finding a way to vet that information that your subcontractors are providing to the government. It could be a third party. It could be, hey, provided someone within my organization that doesn't do costs, so at least they can find some way, or just the fact that will they even provide that support? I have had so many procurements where they'd have 10 teaming members or subcontracts, and I'd only get 5 sealed packages, and the prime didn't have the information those remaining 5. What did I do? So you usually won't get kicked out of the competition when things happen like that, Kyle. But instead, what'll happen is you got to go through that difficult, that embarrassing phone call from the contracting house. Hey, did you mean to have something submitted from these other companies? Way to make a great impression, subcontractor, for not submitting your bid. So if you really want to do business with that prime ever again, that's a way to lose relationships. All right, yeah. So subcontractors are usually the biggest pain. And close behind is indirect expenses. If we want to talk more about that, we could. But subs to me is, oh boy.
I got a cold sweat right when you mentioned it.
Sorry.
No, and you nailed it. I mean, these marriages of convenience are tricky, and I think I'm going to bring it back to what you started with in terms of we want a strong, candid relationship with our customer, with our CO. I think sometimes we give our subs, I'm speaking from a prime perspective, kind of short shrift, and kind of forming those strong relationships, early warning, guys, this is what we're seeing in terms of this is the type of support, the type of cost you need to be ready to provide. Doesn't mean it'll be perfect, but maybe being less reactive with our subs, more questions, all that good stuff. But no, challenging, but that's a good one, Jeff. Maybe
yeah, and then what you could do is you provide them with a template. Be like, look, I want to try to make this as easy as possible for you. So here's, I'm going to provide you the blank paragraphs. I'll give you the headers. You need to fill in with your own information. So do whatever you can to make it as easy as possible to sub, especially if they're smaller businesses. I mean, yeah, some of you will have small business contracting goals, and that's great. And you want to meet them and find the right companies to team with. But ultimately, that documentation that they submit, you're responsible for it as the prime. But so make it as easy as possible. I mean, I get it. It takes more time, but you want to lose because a couple of your small businesses didn't provide the right data?
Yep.
Not me.
Don't leave it up to chance. It's a great call out there, Jeff.
Yeah.
Maybe let's finish with one last question. I think this will really help all of the audience in line who are going to win business. Coming from the evaluation side, Jeff, outside of what we've already covered, is there anything else bidders, offers can proactively do to make their evaluators, their COs' lives easier? Anything else you'd recommend?
I mean, we've talked a lot about being, show as much as you can, I think is the bottom line. And I get it. There's always pricing strategy that's behind the scenes to what goes in to what actually gets submitted to the government. And I'll never be one to tell you to reveal that pricing strategy in writing to the government, because sometimes your pricing strategy is undercut no matter what. I would never, ever, ever say that, because that tells the government to bump up your bid. Another pricing strategy may be, strong key personnel, weak, supporting person, and whatever that is, keep that out. So keep the strategy out, but make sure that the tactics that are detailed within your proposal still make sense for whatever strategy you end up picking. why is this best value? Why does this work for the government? Why is this realistic? Like, start writing a bit of that narrative in there for them, and making that argument. I'm not saying it always works. So sometimes I see through the BS when that happens, but at least you're trying and connecting the dots that, like, we've carefully reviewed our technical approach, and this is how we incorporate it into the cost volume and why there are no gaps in that process. So again, so make it as easy as possible by pointing as much as you can point, and sometimes you can't point because as you may or may not know, when the initial cost evaluation happens, the people who are looking at the technical volume should not be looking at the price right away. So don't try to make arguments about how good your technical approach is and your cost volume. You're just wasting your time, because by the time the people on the technical side end up contributing to the cost side, they've already scored your proposals. They've already turned it in and said you're good, satisfactory, excellent, whatever that is. All those scores are in, but now we still need someone on the cost side to say, listen, does this labor mix make sense based on what they said they were going to do? So they'll still keep open and read your technical volume, but they'll also have the cost volume at the same time when making that evaluation. So when that point, when you have the two set side by side, help them make sense when they're doing that technical cost evaluation. So tying those does make sense.
That's a great. I learned something there, Jeff. So no, really good addition. Just always it's a good day. Excellent. Well, let's do this. Like I said, time flies. Jeff, I could talk to you for another 2 hours. We won't subject the audience to that. Really appreciate your time and contributions. Great conversation. Just for those who joined, maybe not quite at the beginning, as a registrant, you'll receive the recording. You'll receive the slides, just to be perfectly clear. Jeff, you're invited back. Thanks again. Any last words before I end the webinar?
No, I again appreciate the invite. I look forward to continuing this conversation. You don't like something I said, come talk to me. I'd love to have that discussion with you.
Excellent. Awesome. Thanks again, Jeff, and thanks everyone for your time. See you next time.
Thanks, everyone.